This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Are you or a family member living with a rare disease? It's not as uncommon as you may think. 1 in 10 Americans have a rare disease. There are at least 7,000 known diseases, according to the National Organization for Rare Disorders. Today, Where We Live, we talk to Connecticut residents with rare conditions, and we learn how the medical community is working to identify treatments and cures. Decades ago, Congress passed a law to incentivize pharmaceutical companies to develop drugs to treat rare diseases. What, if any, treatments are available today? Also, how does Connecticut stack up against other states when considering the voices of the rare disease community in policy? We talk about that coming up. You can join us too, 888-720-9677. That's 888-720-WNPR. You can share a comment on our Facebook page or find us on Twitter at Where We Live. Joining us first on the phone is a Connecticut resident, John D'Alessandro, who has been living with osteogenesis imperfecta, a rare condition. John, welcome to our show.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Now, I mentioned osteogenesis imperfecta. So describe this disease for us. And when did you first learn that you had this, John?
Well, to describe it in basic words, it's brittle bones disease. I really first got diagnosed when I was 40 years old, which is kind of on the rare side because I was not born in this country. I was born in Italy, and my diagnosis was because of a fall I had. And it was just almost a happy accident that I was diagnosed.
Mm. So this was after you fell, and what did you break, and what did the doctor tell you when you got that diagnosis?
Well, when I had fractures throughout my life, but nobody attributed it to anything besides me being a klutz, I think. But then one day when I was 40 years old, I had a simple trip and fall accident, and I broke my wrist. And the attending physician, when he looked at my x-ray, he concluded that this was not a simple trip and fall accident. It looked like I was hit by a freight train. And just doing some basic investigation, I had all of the characteristics of OI, osteogenesis imperfecta. He diagnosed me with OI, and that's why I first actually learned about it. Before that, I never even heard of it.
Mm. You mentioned when you were growing up, you were called a klutz. And so talk to us about your childhood. So when you fell, did you often break your bones, John?
Oh, yeah. Anytime I would fall, I would fracture like something, my leg, my forearm, even through something as simple as, like I said, tripping, which nobody even thinks about. I would fracture something. And back then, I don't know if it was even heard of, but up until, I would say, 10 years ago, it wasn't very common, the word osteogenesis imperfecta, as far as I was concerned. And growing up was kind of rough because, I was kind of, I would say, I won't say excluded from sports, but I kind of shied away from anything that would cause me to fracture. Mm. And that had a tremendous toll on my self-esteem and just everything.
I'm sorry to hear that, John, when you were a child and how that impacted you. When you finally got that diagnosis at 40, how did your life change?
Well, at that point, my life wasn't about to change because I was set in my career. I was set in my, where my life was going. But as I was younger, if I had known about my condition, I think I would have picked a better career, more suited for my lifestyle, because I grew up in a blue collar family, and I didn't have too many choices as far as where my career is heading. But knowing what my condition was, if I had known what my condition was, I think I would have made other choices.
Mm. It sounds like when you have this condition that you're dealing with chronic pain, John. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I'm constantly in chronic pain, and that's just from the arthritis that came about from all my fractures, and just from my my bones are soft. It just causes me, a lot of pain day to day. People ask me, how would you equate the pain that you're going through? I said, well, I equate it through having the flu and having aches and pains during that time. I experienced that every day. And there was a time where my doctor was prescribing painkillers such as hydrocodone and so forth. But then when the opioid crisis finally, arose, kind of scared me to the point where, I don't take any painkillers at all, except for over-the-counter ibuprofen and like Tylenol. But even that, I'm still leery about taking. And that's what, led me to, my early retirement.
Right.
Because I just couldn't function anymore.
You're hearing John D'Alessandro here on Where We Live. He's a Connecticut resident who's living with osteogenesis imperfecta, as he described it, brittle bones. We're talking about rare diseases. 1 in 10 Americans have a rare disease. Coming up, we'll hear from the national organization that works to advocate for people with rare diseases. John, I understand your son inherited this condition as well. We'll be talking to him in just a few minutes, but can you tell us about the treatment that you're under for your condition? Because there is no cure, but I understand that you have to go for infusions twice a year.
Yes, we do. We do go for infusions. Actually, we're very, very, very fortunate to have these infusions through the Connecticut Children's Medical Center. It's kind of ironic that a 61-year-old man like myself goes through the Children's Medical Center to get my infusions. But at this point, it helps me with my chronic pain because my bones are not growing anymore. So it doesn't help me in the long run, but it does help me with my pain management, per se.
You can join our conversation, 888-720-9677, as we talk about rare diseases. Kat's calling in from Torrington. Kat, what did you want to share?
Oh, hi, Lucy. Good morning. I told your screener I might crack up because the story does not have a happy ending. Back in 1989, my niece was diagnosed with a autoimmune disease called Behçet's disease. That's Behcets. Only about 1 in 100,000 people in the United States will contract this disease. It's thought to be hereditary, yet nobody in my family has it. Let's see. She was age 16 when she had it, and let's see. It's something that will attack your organs, one by one, and you have no control over it. She must have gone through about 20 surgeries in her life, removing, she had 1 ovary removed, and she had many feet of her intestines removed because they were diseased and weren't functioning. She got married in her 20s, and they told her she could never get pregnant because of the removal of the ovary and all the other conditions that she had. But miraculously, she did get pregnant, and she left us with my grandniece, Ada. Elizabeth passed in 2016, unfortunately, and due to Behçet's complications, it attacked her brain, and she went into a coma, and we lost her. But it's I don't know. It's a disease that's found mainly in Turkey and Asian countries. And older males are the typical ones that would get it, not a 16-year-old female from Utah. So, we're still missing her incredibly, but we have Ada, and Ada is so much like her mom. It's scary.
Well, thank you,
and
Kat.
we just pray.
Thank you so much for sharing a little bit of your family story, and I'm sorry for your loss, but so good to hear about Ada's being in your life now. We appreciate you calling in today here on Where We Live.
Yeah, thank you, Lucy.
John, I'm sure you probably heard our listener talking
yes, I did,
talking
I'm sorry
about
to
it.
hear that.
When we hear these kinds of stories, and even when you got your diagnosis, where did you turn for support, John? Because when we think about rare diseases, the ability to have support and to know that there are others like yourself, and how they're managing their condition.
As far as the support that I got it strictly from my family, specifically my wife, which without her, I wouldn't be where I am today, because at the time when I first got diagnosed, she was pregnant with my son. And at that time, we did not know if he had it or not. And I didn't do enough research to find out if it was hereditary or not. I did some research on my own extended family, grandmothers, grandfathers, and so forth, and I found out that nobody on both sides of my family has even ever fractured a bone, let alone multiple fractures. So, and that's one thing I don't understand, if I was hereditary or not. But then we had some genetic testing while my wife was pregnant, and we did find out that my son had it, but we wanted to know if his condition was going to be the same as mine. You see, osteogenesis imperfecta has, I believe, 4 different types, and it seems that our type, my son and I, type 1, is the milder of all the forms. And, we could say we're very fortunate that, if we had to get it, we got the milder ones, but there are others out there with our condition with the very severe.
Well, Christian is actually with us here on Zoom, your son, Christian D'Alessandro. Welcome to the show. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
So you're 17 now, and we heard a little bit of your father's story. He was diagnosed when he was an adult at 40. So your family found out soon after you were born. Can you talk about what life has been like for you so far?
Well, when I was very young, I knew that I couldn't do the same things that kids could do my age, like, for instance, playing football or riding their bike, because, the dangers it has. So as I went on, I started to realize that I could do more things, like, for instance, music, or doing clubs after school and spending time with people who don't do the same things that the kids that were around me could do, like sports. But I could also have a good time with them, too.
So I understand that when individuals have osteogenesis imperfecta, that oftentimes surgery can become common. So can you tell us, how many surgeries you've had to have so far?
At this point in my life, I have had 5 surgeries.
And these involved what parts of your body, if you don't mind me asking? Were they like your wrist or your arm, as your father had mentioned when he fell?
Yes, all 5 of those surgeries had to do with my left arm. One of them or two of them had to do with my elbow, another two had to do with my forearm, and one had to do with my wrist.
So what was that like to have to go through those surgeries? And I asked your father about the support that he gets, and he talks about his family. And so you lean on them during these tougher times when you've had to undergo surgery, Christian?
Oh, of course. I mainly use my dad as support because he went through these things, and he should know better than me, when he gets stressed out, when he should go into surgery, or when he needs to have a cast or something. But I also turn to my mom, because she was always my guiding figure and almost the person that makes me feel calm in a stressful situation.
Mm. So you talked a little bit about, not being able to play sports, and maybe some of the decisions that you and your family had to make in terms of, attending a school that was better suited for you. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, at a very young age, most of my friends around me were all obsessed about, being in the NFL, being a pro football player, being a really, really great linebacker, even though that I had no qualifications of doing any of that. And even if I tried, I'd be on a gurney within 30 seconds. So, but as time went on, I realized that sometimes you don't need to be the professional football player and get recognized by millions for the thing that you love to do. Sometimes you could just work in an office building and build a business up from the ground up and have a time with that and have fun with coworkers and have fun with friends and, create things.
And when you at the school that you attend now, how do they accommodate the fact that you have this condition so that you don't break a bone while you're in school, but you're still able to participate in like physical education? Can you talk about that, Christian?
Well, at my school, we have a specialized plan for myself called an IEP, and it basically helps me for instance, when I'm in gym and there's an activity that might not be too safe for me, I could either opt out and go to our wellness room and work out there, or I could opt into, say, a study hall and do some work there. And they're quite accommodating for my needs. And I also have access to the school's the physical therapist, and it really helps being at the school, and it really helps being there, being helpful.
So it sounds like you're in a good school environment now. John, you're still with us. When you hear your son talk about living with this disease, he has, when you compare his childhood with yours, much improvement?
Oh, absolutely. No, there is absolutely no doubt. Like I said, years ago, people never even heard of osteogenesis imperfecta or, the accommodations that they would have put in place because of a person that with limited, mobility. And now the educational system is, I can't say enough good things about it.
Christian, I understand that you and your dad go to the Children's Medical Center to get the infusions together. Can you talk about that with us?
Well, usually we go in for infusions, early in the morning. We're like half asleep, and we usually recognize that it's usually a full day ordeal, or at least a half day. So we usually bring in, say, an iPad to watch Netflix or Hulu on, or we ask them if we could have any snacks, or, see if we could get anything to eat before then. And it may be hard in hindsight, being there all day with an IV in your arm and, staying in the same spot for almost 6 hours, but you really get to realize how much fun you could have sitting in a seat, being on your phone or being on a gaming system.
And your father. Go ahead, John.
If I could interrupt, the infusion center has made strides as far as like accommodating or even their protocol. When when we first started getting infusions, it would be like early in the morning to late afternoon deal. But as time went on and things gotten to be a lot better, and now it's gotten to the point where you could go in at a certain time and be out, let's say 2 to maybe 3 to 4 hours later. And like my son said, they go, above and beyond as far as accommodating. And a lot of times we sit right across the room from each other, and he has a needle in his arm and I got a needle in my arm. And we're, on a time like that, we just we bring our, iPhones or iPads, and we just make the best of it,
So you talked a little bit about the progress, John, but, as the listeners are hearing from you and your son about what it's like to live with this disease, what advancements or improvements would you like to see from insurers or providers, and how they provide care to you or even provide coverage for the treatments that can help you in your quality of life?
Well, as far as that, I can't ask any more from, let's say, CCMC, because they are, I can't say enough good things about them. And as far as research, just like anything else, you have to bring awareness to it. And it's hard for that, because in this situation, we are the minority. If you're going to spend millions on research, they're going to spend it on cancer rather than, let's say, a condition that I might have, because more people will benefit from, getting the research for cancer than a condition that my son and I have. Excuse me.
Christian, did you want to add to that when people hear your story, what you want our listeners to take away from what you and your dad have shared, and how to help people with rare diseases?
Well, one thing that I could say to anyone who has a rare disease that may bring them down, don't let it define you. It may hurt some days, but someday you just gotta let it fall behind you and focus on what you want to do and what you want to do with your life, and not let it bring you down.
Well, Christian D'Alessandro, thank you so much for joining us. I know you have to head to school, so we appreciate you taking some of your time spending it with us. Thank you, Christian.
Oh, of course, and it was an honor being here.
And John D'Alessandro, sounds like you got a good son there.
Yeah, he tell you the truth. At my age and his age, he's my inspiration.
Well, thank you.
He truly is.
Thank you, John, for your time today on the show.
Oh, thank you. It's been my pleasure.
You're listening to Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. Coming up, we're going to hear from the National Organization for Rare Disorders, also known as NORD. Each year, NORD puts out an annual state report card ranking states on its policies like Medicaid eligibility and out-of-pocket cost protections for people living with a rare disease. We find out how Connecticut stacks up right after this short break, and we're also going to learn how NORD advocates for people living with a rare disorder. Are you one of them? You can join us, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. NORD is the National Organization for Rare Disorders, and each year the organization puts out a report card analyzing how states address policy issues for the rare disease community. Now, Connecticut scored an A in out-of-pocket costs for prescription drugs, B in screening newborns for rare diseases, and a C in step therapy, a process by which insurers require patients to take one or more alternative medications before they can access the drug prescribed by their provider. Connecticut got a failing grade in telehealth. Now, NORD is working to create a rare disease advisory council in Connecticut to elevate the voices of residents with rare diseases in state government and policy. Joining us now on Zoom is Alicia Lawrence. She's Patient Services Case Manager for the National Organization for Rare Disorders, and Alicia is based in Danbury. Welcome to our show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me today, Lucy. It's a pleasure to be here to talk about NORD's efforts and to tell inspiring rare disease patient stories, connect with the community and clinicians, as well as push for technical, medical, and policy advances for the fight of rare diseases.
I think you summed it up there, Alicia, but tell me, how often are people reaching out to you for help? And tell us a little bit about that.
So in my role as a patient services case manager, I also manage the information and resource services department. And so we get calls, email inquiries daily in regards to patients looking for assistance, as well as financial assistance, any things related to insurance. In the last year, we've had over 60,000 calls answered, 50,000 emails answered, and we've provided well over 305 rare caregiver respite awards. We assist patients as much as we can.
Mm. When I talked with John D'Alessandro earlier about, where he gets support and how, when he talked about his condition, osteogenesis imperfecta, being, in the minority, that it's not well known. And so people needing that support and needing that advocacy to help them, Alicia, that can be really important for the whole family.
Yes, and we do have, general rare disease information database. In that database, it's called our rare disease database. And in that database, we have over 1,300 rare disease reports. And actually, Chris's diagnosis is one of those that we do have. And at the end of the report, there are organizations as well as information about the diagnosis. And for his particular diagnosis, there is a foundation called the OI Foundation that, if the family wanted to, reach out and see what supports, or just to find others like themselves, we encourage that patients and families do so.
I understand that there are about 7,000 known rare diseases, according to NORD. We learned about one of them, osteogenesis imperfecta. What are some other, common diseases for this population that you're hearing from, Alicia?
Some of the more common rare diseases we have, and we do have patient assistance programs. I'm just thinking about the ones that we have patient assistance programs for at present, is alpha-1, narcolepsy, tardive dyskinesia, PKU, are some of the more, I don't like to say common, because every rare disorder is rare.
Right.
There is not, there's more than 90% of the rare diseases lack FDA approved treatment. And so, for some, there are no cure. For a lot, there are no cure. So it's just important to be able to provide, my role is to be able to provide as much support as possible to the patient and caregivers when they call or email in.
Related to what you just shared, Alicia, for people with rare conditions, finding, particular medication for their condition, is there copay assistance where they might run into where their insurance plan may cover something, but maybe not another medication because they have a rare disorder? And how does NORD help in that way?
So there are rare disorders where if there is a medication that may be able to treat the diagnosis, there could be a copay assistance attached, and it's based on the insurance how much that copay would be. Although we would love to be able to provide assistance to everyone that calls in, that's just not something we are able to do. And so what I usually do is encourage patients to reach out to the insurance company to just find out, if there are alternatives. We can also ask them to contact the manufacturer. Sometimes the manufacturer has, that, assistance. When we are able to help, our programs help with laboratory and diagnostic testing, physical and occupational therapy, durable medical equipment, adaptive equipment. We also, in some cases, are able to help travel to medical appointments as well. It really does depend on the particular need of the patient.
Right. I wanted to fit in a call, Alicia. Arinda's calling in from Meriden. Arinda, what did you want to share with Alicia Lawrence from the National Organization for Rare Disorders?
Hi, good morning, Alicia.
Good morning.
I have a huge issue with my child being diagnosed with May-Thurner syndrome. And it's usually diagnosed in women, older women, and my child is a sophomore in high school. Mm-hmm. And this has been going on, the pain and discomfort and tons of doctor's visits, scans, lab work, since 7th grade. And now we just found out last month through an MRA that our child has this syndrome. And we really need help with managing the pain and trying to have our child have as normal life as possible. We were told the only cure or help for this would probably be surgery, and Mass General in Massachusetts is the closest hospital that would help us or could possibly help us. But we were told there's no medication that can help. So this is really bothersome.
Alicia, what can you tell Arinda looking for either a specialist or a treatment option for her child with this rare pelvic disorder? Again, it's May-Thurner syndrome.
So, in your case, I would ask, and maybe we can, I don't know if I can get your information offline, or you can contact me at information services at rarediseases.org. But, I can look into what other, options might be available for you as far as financial assistance. So in your case, maybe we would provide resources for travel and lodging, so that, because if you are crossing state lines, I'm sure it's something where you might need to be able to, stay there with, your child as they recover or in the midst of the surgery. So there's a lot to go into it. I don't want to take up so much time, but if you reach out to information services at rarediseases.org and just, identify yourself as, being on the show and me speaking with you, and provide your contact information, I will certainly give you a call to discuss further.
And Arinda, I'm going to put you on hold, and our call screener can get your phone number to share with Alicia post-show. Okay? Thank you for calling into the show. So it's interesting to hear from another resident getting a diagnosis for their child, and this is a time of high concern and stress and not knowing where to turn. Very similar to what you hear, Alicia, from other families.
Yes, and it's important that just for NORD is that we just want patients and families to know that we are here for you. The community, we have supports. We have a Living Rare, Living Strong conference, which is really geared towards patients and caregivers. And, because of COVID, we haven't been able to meet in person, but usually this is a conference, really for patient and caregivers. And it's, our motto at NORD is together. Our motto is alone we are rare, but together we are strong. This is our motto. And, rare disease families, it can be very overwhelming, a lot of anxiety, uncertainty, and especially for like the caller, where it's a patient who is new, a new diagnosis. There's a lot of anxiety that comes with that. And we're here to support in any way we can.
Well, Alicia Lawrence, thank you for coming on the show and for being a resource for our listeners like Orinda who are looking for support with this new diagnosis in their family. Alicia Lawrence, again, is Patient Services Case Manager for the National Organization for Rare Disorders, also known as NORD. Alicia is based in Danbury. And remind our listeners your website again for people to reach out.
Sure. So our NORD's website is rarediseases.org, and there's a contact us section where if you have any inquiries or specific questions, you're more than welcome to, place it in our contact us section.
Thank you, Alicia, for your time today.
Thank you.
You're listening to Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. Earlier, we learned about a rare disease, osteogenesis imperfecta, or brittle bones. Coming up, we're going to hear about another rare condition and learn about a groundbreaking clinical trial at UConn to help Americans living with this disease. You can join us, too. Find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. We just heard from NORD, the National Organization for Rare Disorders, about how it helps people with rare diseases. As Alicia Lawrence said, there's no approved treatment for 95% of rare diseases, and patients are often treated with off-label drugs or treatments not approved by the FDA for that specific disease. Now, biopharmaceutical companies are working on orphan drugs or drugs for rare diseases and have more than 800 projects in clinical development. There's a one-of-a-kind clinical trial at UConn for the treatment of a rare disorder known as glycogen storage disease, a disease that can be fatal. Joining us now on Zoom with more is Amber Berry, who's a registered nurse with the Glycogen Storage Disease and Disorders of Hypoglycemia at Connecticut Children's and clinical trials at UConn Health. Amber, welcome to our show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So glycogen storage disease, can you describe this for us and what it's like for patients who've been diagnosed?
Sure. So basically what happens after we eat is that our body is fueled by glucose. And so we eat our glucose, we use as fuel, and then what we don't need right away, we put into our liver to save for later so that if we don't eat for a period of time, we can take it out of our liver and use it to regulate our blood sugar. So the problem with glycogen storage disease is that once it goes into their liver, they are missing an enzyme that is responsible for helping break down the glycogen to put it back into the bloodstream and so they can use it as fuel. So once it goes into their liver, it is essentially stuck and they can't get it back out, which can be very problematic because we need glucose to survive. And if they can't get it back out and their blood sugar goes too low and they don't have access to food or anything to bring it back up, it can potentially be fatal.
So what is the prognosis? You mentioned it can be fatal. Was this, prior to a few decades ago? And what are some of the treatments available today?
Yeah, so really up until 1971, it was almost an exclusively fatal disease. In the 70s, they started using continuous feeding. So they would put a tube in through either the nose or through the stomach to continuously feed patients to maintain their blood sugar, which helped. But there's other complications that can go along with unregulated blood sugar. So in the 80s, they actually found out that cornstarch can be a treatment. So since the 80s, our patients have been mixing cornstarch with water and drinking that, and it has shown to be a continuous source of glucose for the body. And so that really is how they've been getting by. And we titrate that dose very carefully so they have the exact amount of fuel that their body needs, not too much, not too little. But again, it can be very anxiety provoking. They have a risk for severe hypoglycemia. So they have to monitor their blood sugar very frequently. And many of our patients have to drink this cornstarch every 3 to 4 hours throughout the day without missing a dose. And that happens even through the night. So when they're little, their parents have to wake up and make sure they're never missing any doses and that their doses are given on time. So again, very, very high anxiety for the families for sure.
And that really impacts their quality of life. I understand you're part of a clinical trial at UConn to help people with this disease, glycogen storage disease. Can you tell us about it?
Yes, it's very exciting. So we actually started a gene therapy clinical trial with Ultragenics in 2018. So we were the first center to infuse a gene therapy into a patient with glycogen storage disease. And since then, we've treated several patients, and this is a study that's happening throughout the world. So we, for a few years, were in the phase 1-2 part of the trial, which is really monitoring for safety and dosing. And we recently moved into phase 3 of the trial, which is now monitoring for efficacy. And really what we're trying to do is make sure that that they can maintain their blood sugar without this severe risk of hypoglycemia, so that their risk of death is decreased.
So tell me a little bit more about how this works. So you're taking a repaired part of the gene and how that's then helping their liver, Amber?
Yeah. So basically we take the part of the gene that they're missing, we put it in a viral vector. So really what happens is this virus, which is a pretty benign virus, goes directly to the cells in the liver, to the nucleus. And so basically it brings the gene that they're missing, that they need to make this enzyme that helps break down that glycogen. And it puts it into the nucleus of the liver cells so that now they are able to make that enzyme. So the theory here is that once they're able to make the enzyme, they will then be able to release the glucose out of the liver to maintain their blood sugar.
Oh, that's really fascinating to hear that explained to us. And I understand just this year, was it? There was a patient, the first in the world to receive this infusion at UConn?
Yes, so the first in the world in the phase 3 part of the trial. Again, we infused the first patient in 2018 in the very beginning, phase 1-2 part of the trial. But phase 3 just started, and we did infuse the first person in the world at UConn Health just a couple months ago.
Can I ask how that person's doing?
No, you may not.
But what a groundbreaking development to have that at UConn.
Yeah, it's really been wonderful, and I think it offers hope for a lot of the families. And we're treating a specific type of glycogen storage disease. There are several different types that we work with that affect the liver and muscles, and so we're working with glycogen storage disease type 1A. And I think it just really offers a lot of hope for obviously patients who have type 1A, but really as a whole for the community, because glycogen storage disease is getting attention and people are caring about it, which I think is really, really wonderful.
Right. That's what John D'Alessandro told us earlier about just raising awareness about even the disease that he and his son have, osteogenesis imperfecta, and how that awareness is so important. Can you tell us more about, are there other clinical trials underway, whether it's at UConn or the work that you're doing at Connecticut Children's for this particular disease?
Yeah, so we do have another upcoming clinical trial that will also be at UConn. That is sponsored by Moderna, and it will be an mRNA treatment that we are investigating. Both of these, if anybody's interested, can be found and learned more about on clinicaltrials.gov. Or people could contact the clinical trials unit at UConn directly for more information on both of those. So again, really exciting. We have a couple different companies that are coming in with different ideas for research on this disease. And at Connecticut Children's, we do have a program. So we do see patients with glycogen storage disease. We monitor them, we titrate their cornstarch doses and, do frequent labs and make sure that they're doing okay. So that's been pretty wonderful as well.
When we think about, how this work is being done and the funding that's needed, can you talk about that at all? Where these funding sources come from and why it's so important to not neglect people with rare diseases, Amber?
Yeah, so it is a lot to keep up with for sure. We see patients every 3 to 4 months, so they have frequent labs. They take cornstarch, which is obviously something that you can buy at the grocery store. It's the same thing that you thicken your gravy with, and it only costs a few dollars for a container. However, they are taking large doses of cornstarch around the clock, so they go through a fair amount of cornstarch in a given month, and it is not often something that is covered by insurance companies since it is a food product. So there are struggles with that for sure. And, some of our patients have difficulties coming into the office because transportation issues. And so there's always a lot of hurdles, I think, to overcome. But in any community, really with any rare disease, I think community support, other people who have the same disease can be really helpful. I know with glycogen storage disease, the community is very supportive and active. And we do have several different foundations that help families who need funding, for example. So there seems to always be some avenues for opportunity.
Mm-hmm. And we've been talking specifically about glycogen storage disease, but when we think about these other rare diseases that are out there and how the research community is working to help find better treatments or even cures, what does the future look like, Amber, from your perspective?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of hope. I have to say, when I first learned about glycogen storage disease, I had been a nurse for 9 years and I had never heard about it before. So I think now I'm fully immersed in it. So I know a lot about rare disease and other rare diseases. But I think the awareness has definitely increased. I know there's different things happening in Connecticut about rare disease, and there's Rare Disease Day, and it just helps to bring more attention to it and more awareness to it, which is something that we certainly try to do on a regular basis. And I do think that it has an impact in the long run because it does bring attention to these diseases. And, it has brought clinical trials and potential for new treatments to these diseases, which I think is really moving everything forward.
That's Amber Berry, again, a registered nurse with the glycogen storage disease and disorders of hypoglycemia at Connecticut Children's, and she's also involved with the clinical trials at UConn Health. Amber, thank you for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Today's show was produced by Sujatha Srinivasan. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Katie Pellico was on the phones today, and our technical director is Kat Pastor. Now, coming up tomorrow, through J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series, created a magical world, championing acceptance and understanding. But the author's controversial comments about the transgender community have alienated many of her lifelong fans. On the next Where We Live, we explore how the fandom is moving forward. And what did the series mean to you? We want to hear from you. That conversation tomorrow.